This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Chapter 42, Falme, and our symbol is the Shanshan helmet.
Looks like an insect. Tastes like a
human.
According to the Trollocs, anyway.
Nynaeve pressed Elaine back into the narrow alleyway, between a cloth merchant shop and a potter's works, as the pair of women linked by a silvery leash passed by, heading down the cobblestone street toward Falme Harbor. They did not dare allow the pair to come too close. The people in the street made way for those two, even more quickly than they did for Shanshan soldiers, or the occasional noble's palanquin, thickly curtained now that the days were cold. Even the street artists did not offer to draw them in chalks or pencils, although they pestered everyone else. Nynaeve's mouth tightened as her eyes followed the Soldam and Damani through the crowd. Even after weeks in the town, the sight sickened her. Perhaps it sickened her more now. She could not imagine doing that to any woman, not even Moraine or Leandrin. Well, maybe Leandrin, she admitted sourly.
It is horrific. It really is pretty awful.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the things that this chapter does effectively is nail that home. Just how awful the treatment of these people is and how being treated like an object is.
Yeah, these chapters
terrible.
Are really dark, and they leave Egwene scarred forever.
This is sort of her in the box moment. Sort of how Egwene is captured and tortured for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's sad that I say for the first time.
Sometimes, at night, in the small, smelly room the two of them had rented above a fishmonger, Nynaeve thought of what she would like to do to Leandrin when she got her hands on her. Leandrin even more than Suroth. More than once she had been shocked at her own cruelty, even while she was delighted at her inventiveness. I liked that.
I thought it was an interesting allusion to how somebody good could go down a very dark path.
Sure.
Can you see Nynaeve coming out as a Forsaken? And
Totally.
how
Yes.
evil she would be as a Forsaken?
She has that thought while they're hiding in that alleyway, and still trying to keep the pair in sight, meaning the Soldam and Damani. Her eyes fell on a bony man well down the street.
Couldn't be Padden Fane.
That looked like Padden Fane, she thought incredulously. It couldn't be. Not here.
And of course we know it is because we know he is there.
And he's got a servant, apparently.
Assume one of his dark friends. Or do you think it's, no, it's Shanshan, so I'm guessing it's someone given to him by Turok.
Yeah, a servant of high degree with one temple shaved. Nynaeve notes. So that's maybe not so much a servant as a minder.
Possibly.
You know what I'm saying?
Like an escort.
Turok's right-hand dude. I forget his name.
The one who...
Following him around the city.
Fane kills later.
Yes.
When Fane says, now I know how you're going to die.
He decided how the man would die.
Exactly. Yeah, that's probably this dude.
Yuan? Is that right? That sounds right.
Yuan, yeah.
Our radio's always right. Nynaeve, Elaine said softly. Could we move on now? That fellow selling apples is looking at his table as if he's thinking he had more a few moments ago.
Which he did.
And I would not want him wondering what I have in my pockets.
Which are apples. I noticed Nynaeve combs her hair out. She can't tug on her braid.
I highlighted that too. And it's important for her disguise because she's going to be obvious with the braid, or a lot more obvious. And she puts the ring away as well.
Well, yeah, she puts away the
Yeah.
I said high ring.
The target on her finger.
Right.
But the narration says, among so many strangers, the two of them had been able to sink into the city unnoticed.
I like the irony of the queen stealing apples because she's hungry.
Right. You stole those apples? Nynaeve hissed quietly, pulling Elaine out into the crowded street. Elaine, we don't have to steal. Not yet, anyway. No? How much money do we have left? You've been not hungry very often at mealtimes the last few days. Well, I am not hungry, Nynaeve snapped, trying to ignore the hollow in her middle. Everything cost considerably more than she had expected. She notes that the locals have been complaining the same. Just the conflict and chaos drives prices of everything up.
I think that is a temporary situation, though, until, well, when Shanshan comes back, and it's not just the Forerunners, but the actual return.
Yeah.
don't they stabilize the whole country and prices start to drop again?
That sounds right. And I think in the interim, things get really bad when Rand tries to stabilize it first. Is that right?
Well, I mean, Rand never really gets a chance to.
He does some work in Aradoman, from what I can remember.
That's true. And then he ends up abandoning it when all the food's rotting.
Yeah. He realizes that there's not very much that can be done.
Nynaeve asks if Elaine used channeling to get the apples.
Yeah.
She said, yeah, just a little bit.
She basically channeled to make a distraction so the guy would look the other way while she filched the apples.
Unlike Aladdin, she doesn't have a monkey, so she uses a little bit of the one power.
One power monkey.
I'll take one power monkey, please. Thank you very much.
Elaine keeps saying throughout this chapter that she doesn't understand why the people don't resist, and Nynaeve keeps talking sense and saying how. What would they do against Aes Sedai and monsters?
I mean, it's like watching tanks roll down your street and you having, like, slingshots. And
Right,
being like,
and
well,
throw
what do we
rocks at
do
it.
about that? Like, yeah, I have nothing.
Yeah. On the next page here, Nynaeve talks about all the various Shanshan beasts. I forgot all the names of the individual ones, but bronze-scaled tailless cats, the flying beasts, wingless birds with coarse leather skin, which is only some of them, some of the different types, that is.
Of course, the flying ones are the Rockin. She could not become used to seeing people riding things that look like bronze-scaled tailless cats. Those are the Lopar.
And the wingless birds are Corlm or Torlm?
Corlm.
Corlm.
You always, all the Shanshan words, you sort of got to in
Yeah,
sort of
however you
swallow the
pronounce
words as you say it.
Corlm. Corlm.
Well, it's funny because in the picture I'm looking at, the Torm have tails, but they call them tailless animals. So all the images of Torm must be wrong because...
Grolm are the big frogs, basically.
Yeah.
That's how I see the beaked frogs.
And then the Rockin and Tilrockin are worms. Dragons without legs, front legs.
Pterodactyls.
Yeah. Shredder elephants. I sort of think of the wingless birds as raptors, like from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, more or less. I just kind of I always imagine
feathers.
just like huge emu. But they don't have feathers? Is that right? Wingless birds with coarse leather skin and sharp beaks higher above the cobblestones than the helmeted heads of the soldier.
You know, it doesn't say that they have feathers, but I've always pictured them with feathers. They appear as hairy flightless birds. Their fur usually gray, black, or brown in color. Keen hunters. Like they hunt the Trollocs in the last battle.
Yeah.
Like furry emus with killer instincts.
Yes. And at this part, Elaine brings up, because Nynaeve is scolding her for channeling at all, Elaine says, well, you've channeled with Domani right in front of you.
She actually channeled at a Domani.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to experiment with the collar.
Yeah, she's trying to... She says, I had to know if there was a way to unfasten those collars. And apparently she found it. Nynaeve figured it out. And then they had to hide for 3 days. But also... This is important because it'll come up later. She, meaning Nynaeve, had thought, like Elaine, that the Domani must all be prisoners eager to escape, but it had been the woman in the silver collar who raised the cry.
That's what happens when someone's truly broken.
I was going to use the same word, broken. Broken to the plow of the Shanshan army.
When you think you deserve to be enslaved, deserve to be treated like an object.
Yeah, and we see it happening. Egwene talks about it a little later when she encounters the Pura, who had once been an Aes Sedai named Rima, I think it was.
Of the Yellow Ajah.
Yeah.
And her story does not end well. She ends up basically becoming Pura and forgetting herself. And later, when Mat is rescuing Aes Sedai, they say she's lost. There's nothing left of her. They don't even try and rescue her because she would help the Shanshan and try and prevent herself from being rescued.
Yeah.
So we actually get to see her lose herself throughout the series and become just another Domne, which is tough. Tough to see.
But Nynaeve moves her and Elaine closer to the buildings that house the Damani, and they're watching. Eating mechanically, Nynaeve tried once more to plan. Being able to open the collar, if she really could, did no good at all unless she could reach Egwene. The apples did not taste so sweet anymore. And then we switch perspectives to Egwene, with Nynaeve right outside the building.
Is Nynaeve right outside the building?
I believe so.
Because she's just kept up in the quote-unquote stables, because they treat them like animals.
Yeah.
So they don't call them barracks or homes. They call them stables.
From the narrow window of her tiny room under the eaves, one of a number roughly walled together from whatever had been there before, Egwene could see the garden where the Damani were being walked by their Soldam. It had been several gardens before the Shan-Shan knocked down the walls that separated them and took the big houses to keep their Damani. The trees were all but leafless, but the Damani were still taken out for air, whether they wanted it or not. Egwene watched the garden because Rena was down there, talking with another Soldam, and as long as she could see Rena, then Rena was not going to enter and surprise her. This is because Egwene is channeling a tiny thread of the power that makes her nauseous to do it, but she's also trying to figure out how to open the thing. And by the thing, I mean the
collar.
The collar.
I take Timber out twice a day for air, whether he wants to or not to.
Right.
Because they're animals. They're treated like pets. Like they don't have their own volition.
Agency or thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Certainly don't have any possessions. And they make that explicit. Dominate were possessions. They don't have possessions.
No need of comfort or privacy or possessions. Damani were possessions. Min had a room just like this in another house, but Min could come and go as she would, or almost as she would. Shan-Shan were great ones for rules. They had more for everyone than the White Tower did for novices.
Just an interesting parallel between Egwene and Rand. Rand likes to walk into a place and break all the rules. Egwene has to walk into a place and obey all the rules. She does it in the White Tower. She does it with Shan-Shan. She does it with the Aiel.
Yeah.
Where she has to learn their way and kowtow to their way of life. She has to embrace the rules as they exist. Whereas
Rand just walks in and shatters everything.
Yep. And does whatever he wants. To control the female half of the True Source, you must submit to the rules. The male half is all about wrestling and taking it.
Egwene channeled the one power, probing delicately at the collar around her neck. She remembers some lessons Rena was teaching her about what will happen if you try to do these things. Once, Rena had ordered her to juggle her tiny balls of light with the bracelet lying on the table. Remembering still made her shudder.
So basically, she makes her use the power without permission and
shows her what will happen.
What will happen, and also move the bracelet.
Yeah.
And show her what will happen there. And both seem pretty awful.
She was sure it had only been minutes before the Soldam snapped the bracelet firmly on her own wrists. But to Egwene, the screaming and cramps that had her writhing on the floor had seemed to go on for hours.
Ugh, just horrible torture. Just even trying to escape, even thinking about escaping. I mean, that I think is what's so insidious, that the Adam can control the way you think. They can actually make you, through just Pavlovian training, not think about escape, not think about being your own person. You have to think about what a good little dominate you're going to be, or else they will literally torture you.
Yeah. In a second here, I mean, Min enters and Egwene and Min chat for a little, and Egwene recalls a time when she had considered picking up like one of the very few objects in the room, which was a water pitcher, to try to smash it over Rena's head while she wasn't wearing the bracelet, and she couldn't touch the water pitcher for days, she said, without the similar kind of sickness, torture,
and actually had to convince herself that she would never ever use it as a weapon again.
Right.
And like that's what makes the training so effective, is you actually do have to convince yourself.
And what's
Such
even
a great psychological tool.
Maybe more insidious was that Rena knew what had happened and told her that was the only way that she was going to get water, that she had to touch this thing.
Totally. And
explain to her, like, this is what you have to do in your mind. You have to be sure that you'll never use it as a weapon, and then you'll be allowed to drink water.
And I think that's what's so horrifying about this, is that we can all imagine ourselves giving in over time.
Yeah. I mean, what else can you do? There's not really anything to do except you could try to kill yourself, I guess, by attacking your soul dom.
But even Pura, like, tries. She doesn't even know how. She wants to, and she can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Dark.
Yeah.
Egwene said, sighing, sinking down on her bed. She gestured to the rocks on the table. Rena gave me a test yesterday. I picked out the piece of iron ore and the copper ore, blindfolded, every time she mixed them up. She left them all here to remind me of my success. She seemed to think it was some kind of a reward to be reminded.
I mean, the most expensive part of any mining session is finding the ore.
Right.
Once you find ore, a lot of times it's not that hard, especially if it's near the surface, to get out, or if it's by a cave. And if you've got someone who can just point to it, it's hugely beneficial. You can fund all of your ships and all of your armies, and if you can pull gold and iron and copper out of the ground.
Yeah. Min asks, couldn't you have lied to her and said you didn't tell? And Egwene says, no. Basically.
You just don't understand how the Adom works. You cannot lie.
When Rena is wearing that bracelet, she knows what I am doing with the power, and what I am not. Sometimes, she even seems to know when she isn't wearing it. She says Soldom develop an affinity, she calls it, after a while.
Which is just a woman who can learn to channel, basically learning how to sense someone else channeling without herself being able to channel at all. The Nile, not just a river in Egypt.
I couldn't lie to her, Min. She knew I had sensed the mine as soon as I did. She was so excited, she promised me a pudding with my supper.
And this is where the reward punishment system is really coming into play to make you want something that you intellectually don't want.
Yeah.
That a pudding is enough of a reward, and obviously torture is enough of a stick.
It's a treat for a horse or a dog when they do as commanded.
Timber is way more effective at doing his tricks if he knows I have treats on me somewhere. Way better.
It's like 100% success rate.
Exactly.
If you're holding a tiny piece of jerky.
If I'm not, it's like, what, a 20% success rate?
No,
maybe.
I'd say it's a lot. It's more than that. It's at least 50%. He's good.
Not at the dog park.
But he becomes very focused suddenly when you've got that pudding.
If you say shake, he'll try like 4 times. He'll be like, I'm shaking. I'm doing it. I'm putting my paw out.
Do you see it yet?
Give me that treat. Give me that pudding. And then, of course, the other big reward that she gets is the drug. Saidar.
Yeah, that was interesting. Until this read-through, I'd never really thought about it, but that's like the Damani's, it's like the only source of pleasure in their life is actually being when they do their job, they get this immense source of pleasure, which is embracing Saidar.
Essentially, doing their job is taking the drug.
Right.
And it's another huge reward system. And, just the never being complete, never being, allowed to channel is a nightmare for some of these Domine, because that's their reward system.
And we have right around there a kind of validation for our stretching theory, but she was sure she could handle much more of the power now than she could before leaving Tarvalin. She certainly knew she could do things with it that no sister in the tower had ever thought of doing. They never thought of tearing the earth apart to kill men.
And that comes back a little bit to the different ways men and women stretch. Men stretch in spurts. Women tend to have more of a continuous growth. And that growth can accelerate with heavy use of power. But
I'm nodding.
Men tend to jump up more stepwise, whereas women tend to have more of a continuous function.
Oh, and this is interesting here right after that. I found us a ship, Egwene. The captain has been held here by the Shanshan, and he is about ready to sail with or without permission. Bail Doman.
Yes. We've seen him. He's being held by Turok, telling him stories, and he thinks he's going to run out of stories and be strung up, basically.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about Domine being addicted to the power, but I think the Soul Dam are also addicted to the power. That's why they're always clamoring to... There's way more Soul Dam than there are Domine, which makes sense because we know there are way more women with the ability to learn than there are women with the spark.
Right.
And so it makes a lot of sense that they are also addicted to this drug, and that's why they want to be complete as often as possible and train as often as possible. So one of the reasons why I think Tuon takes so much pleasure in training Domne.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, you're essentially directing a circle, which means that
You are essentially channeling.
yeah, more or less. Now, do you think, this will be wild speculation here, but do you think that the Adam, Adam, well, we know that it essentially creates a forced circle.
What's that thing blocking the river? It's a dam.
But does a Suldam, a Suldam, I presume, doesn't ever embrace Saidar. Adam does it kind of for her so that she doesn't have to embrace Saidar? I would assume, otherwise they would quickly find out that they could channel.
I think, the halo is surrounding them both when you see them.
Them both?
Yes.
I guess what I'm asking is that a direct effect of the Adam, or?
They are in a forced circle, which means I think they are both embracing Saidar.
But the Suldam can't consciously do it.
That's right. I think it's a link that basically opens them up to, and they aren't using their own power. They never use themselves as a channel.
Right.
So I'm guessing that a Suldam, if they were able to channel, would be very weak because they haven't gone, think of it like.
Right. Rena could be like, as powerful as Morghese or Sorleia, who can barely do anything with the power, but they can use it.
Exactly.
But,
and once they're in a circle, it doesn't matter the power. They have the power of the other person.
Right. So basically, in a typical circle that's not forced, the women describe it as embracing Saidar through the other person. Mm-hmm. So you reach through them and use their power. So instead of embracing Saidar through a person, it's a function of the Adam to do that for you.
And I like the idea that maybe the Suldam all have some sort of wilder-like block where they can only, quote-unquote, channel when they are connected to the bracelet.
Yeah.
Convinced, as we've seen, they have major mental blocks against admitting that they can channel.
Oh, yeah.
And we know that the wilder block is a major mental block. And so I think in some ways what you have is a whole nation of wilders. If you wanted them channeling, you'd have to break that block in every single one of them. And when we do see the Suldam being sort of convinced that they can channel, I think what that is the breaking of the wilder block.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
And I mean, best way to break a block like that, I mean, if you could get Nynaeve on the end of that thing for a couple of days, she'd probably be able to embrace Saidar on command.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Kind of a messed up thing to say, forgive me. But I always kind of thought of it that way. Like you could just hook someone up to it and be like, channel or else. Figure it out. And they would, I think. Because, I mean, the Adam seems able to break anyone.
Well, that's a good question because, it doesn't break Aes Sedai from violating their oaths.
Oh, interesting. I forgot all about that. That you wouldn't effectively be able to use chained Aes Sedai in battle.
Correct.
Because they can't hurt people with the power.
Correct. The Shan Chan complained about that a couple of times, that they're not as effective.
I forgot about that, yeah.
That oath is different than just a block.
Right, of course.
Which is just your own mental capacity.
Because there's only one way to remove the oath.
And the oath is the effect of a Terra Angreal. That's an external thing placed on you, whereas the block is an internal mind thing. So I could see how possibly Nynaeve may benefit from it. I think she'd mostly benefit from just losing control for the first damn time.
For the first time
once in her life. Which is all it takes for her to learn how to channel. Needs Mo getting to drown her a little bit.
We've said it before, but all she had to do was die. She's Aes Sedai, and she was crying, Min. She has a collar on her neck. They make her answer to Pura, and she can't do anything more about it than I can. They captured her when Falme fell. She was crying because she's beginning to stop fighting against it, because she cannot take being punished anymore. She was crying because she wants to take her own life, and she cannot even do that without permission. Egwene demonstrates how she's not even able to touch a knife.
Not even to think, once she thinks about killing herself, she's not able to follow through with the plan.
Yeah.
Whether it's touching a knife, whether it's jumping out a window, whether it's holding your breath till you turn blue and die,
you can't even kill yourself.
You can't even kill yourself. and you can't even think about killing yourself.
As her hand came within a foot of the knife, a cramp suddenly contorted her fingers. She says, Damani are not allowed to touch a weapon of any kind. And this is where she talks about having thought about using the pitcher to hit Rena and then wasn't able to touch it, because as soon as her mind thought of using the pitcher as a weapon, that also fell within the restriction. So then she was not able to touch the pitcher.
And the other Aes Sedai that she mentions here, we will later find out that's Shirian Kemenel, and she was actually was given up for dead.
There are two right now.
Yeah. We don't get her name right away, but it turns out that she was later personally trained by Tuon, and Tuon saved her life, and she becomes like the personal pet of Tuon, the other Aes Sedai.
Oh shit! I didn't realize.
And it's a whole like she was crying herself to death basically until Tuon came and took over and broke her essentially. Wow. And it's sort of this weird like she saved her life by breaking her. It's oh man.
Yeah, Tuon is really interesting. She's a ruthless badass, which is kind of what I like about her. I also like that Tuon is this tiny little female character. Like, she's physically so small. I imagine her as like a small lady. I think she's described that way.
Yes.
But she's such a powerful, her force of personality, but also that she's like essentially next in line for the throne of the most powerful empire in the world. And I just like it. I like the imagery. She's so tiny, but so huge. You know what I mean?
You always get really animated when you talk about Tuon. You like her a lot.
She's such a cool character. Yeah. And I guess I like the kind of disparity that she's she's a very small woman, but she's also maybe one of the most powerful people in the world.
But I also like the contrast between the fact that she embodies this like culture of enslavement, but at the same time is a very good person.
Yeah.
And so she's just this inherent contradiction inside of herself. And I think that's what makes some of the most interesting characters. Now, I talk about Matt and Nynaeve being, their contradiction is often the difference between their internal monologue and their external actions, and how they lie to themselves to get them to do good things.
Sure.
And I think Tuon also has this internal conflict between sort of doing the right thing and keeping her culture and way of life going.
And she's also cultured that way, so she doesn't know the difference, which, you know, brings to bear lots of interesting questions. You can see this like anywhere in history. You know, people talk about the founding fathers, like, should we praise them? Like, they were all these awful slave owners, and well, I mean, you know, you can't say like, well, whatever, they own slaves, no big deal, because it is a big deal. But to be wealthy men at the time, they would not have been able to make any other choices, probably. Like, how could you couldn't run a competitive business without owning human beings at that time and place in history. So, you know, it raises an interesting question. Like, can you blame Tuon for breaking Damani for fun if, like, that's the way she was raised? She doesn't know that you shouldn't do that, or she has no concept of that.
And her perspective becomes much more nuanced, I think, as she spends more time with Matt. And she goes from basically, in my opinion, thinking Damani are less than human to thinking that even if they are a bit human, the Empire needs them to continue. You know, she sort of says they're making a choice to channel. You know, they're messing with the power of creation, and therefore they deserve to have that power taken away from them and be used as slaves.
And I guess also that, you know, it's part of their culture to believe that you can't allow these singularly powerful people to be walking around when they could destroy the Empire without being chained. That they're too powerful to be allowed to be free.
Chained Aes Sedai, chained channelers are the source of power of the Empire. That's why Luther was able to take over the continent, is through the Adom, and I think we discussed that with the invention of it.
Yeah.
And that basically if you give up that Adom and enslaved channelers, you're giving up the power that lets you control the entire continent and is the foundation of your empire. And so by admitting that you shouldn't be doing that anymore, you are essentially allowing your empire to collapse. It's the end of your society.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it takes a culture shift. And again, I think the history of the United States and the way our money and power was basically founded on the enslavement of other people. And it's taken, our culture has not recovered from that fully.
Next thing I have is Egwene saying, "Remember both of us, Min. Rima of the Yellow Aja and Egwene Alvir of Emmons Field. Will you do that?" "Stop it," Min snapped.
And I do think Rima is a good stand-in for Egwene if Egwene wasn't rescued.
Yeah.
She would suffer Rina's fate.
And she's saying this conversation right before that it's basically already happening to her, and there's nothing that she can do. She's saying, if a fully trained Aes Sedai can't resist, then I can't either. And the next thing I have is right after Min says, "Stop it," she says, "I've read you, Egwene. I don't understand most of it. I almost never do. But I see things I am sure link you to Rand and Perrin and Mat. And yes, even Galad. The light help you for a fool. How can any of that happen if the Shan-Chan take you across the ocean?"
In particular, linking her with Galad? Really?
I don't know what that was about, but it does say that.
This comes back to me thinking that Robert Jordan was going to put Egwene and Galad together. And I think it would have worked better.
But that's an interesting thing we could keep our eye on. Like, maybe there's a plot shift somewhere where instead of going for one brother, she goes for the other for one reason or another.
Yeah, but at this point, she has shown no interest in Gawain.
Yeah, none.
How is the prophecy linking her to the brother of her warder?
I mean, we know these things can change sometimes. So, for instance, in the episode we just released, I think it was 88, Leandrin walks out of the Waygate and the images shift over the girls.
That they're now in danger.
Right. So maybe because she's, all crushing on Galad so hard that, if she were to go for it
at this point,
it would probably work.
Yeah.
But for one reason or another, that doesn't happen. That's my best guess.
So I want to keep an eye out from when we shift from Galad to Gawain as her destiny boy.
Yeah. As her destiny boy. I'm kind of responding to what's in Discord. Arady is saying, Min never sees a viewing change up until after this point. Min's never wrong, and so on. Yeah, I mean, this viewing that she mentions here, she doesn't say how she'll be connected to Galad, but so we could, I could also say maybe that Galad is an important part of winning the last battle. Galad is part of it, as Moraine likes to say.
Yeah, they're all linked together, and since it doesn't specify exactly how they're linked together, you can pretty much just say, well, yeah, this works.
She says you guys are linked in some way, not,
I'm mostly questioning the writing and asking why did Jordan put Galad there instead of Gawain. But yeah, I really do think it was just Jordan trying to either making a mistake with the brothers' names, or at this point, I think he might have still been thinking he was going to put those two together.
I maintain I like them as a couple.
I do too.
Because it just seems so unlikely. Also, Captain Commander of the Children of the Light and the Amerlin Seat.
Right?
Together.
Such a perfect couple.
Love it.
Talk about a power couple in white. Right? Because she's in her white dress, he's going to be in his white cloak. The two of them would just be blinding on the horizon. And that would have left Gawain to do his duty to Elaine. I've gone over this before. And be the first sword of Vandor, which he should have been from the beginning instead of some stupid warder.
Yeah.
Whereas Galad doesn't have any responsibilities to the kingdom. That's why he goes off and becomes a White Cloak. He has nothing else to do.
I'm laughing, but it's true. And then Rena arrives here. "Your visiting day, is it?" Rena says to Min. "I had forgotten. Well, there is training to be done even on visiting days." Egwene watched sharply as the Soldam took down the bracelet, opened it, and fastened it again over her wrists. Skipping a bit. "You've been channeling." Rena's voice was deceptively mild. There was a spark of anger in her eyes. "You know that is forbidden except when we are complete. Perhaps I've been too lenient with you. Perhaps you believe that because you are valuable now, you will be allowed license. I think I made a mistake letting you keep your old name. I had a kitten called Tuli when I was a child. From now on, your name is Tuli. You will go now, Min. Your visiting day with Tuli is ended."
take her name away from her. How do you think she knows she was channeling? Do you think that's just a feeling?
The Adom must have told her, because she doesn't say anything until after she puts it on.
Do you think she sees like residual flows, or is it just a feeling through the Adom that someone has been flowing? Or is it just that like, oh, you're nauseous?
I suspect it's a feeling through the Adom. Yeah, she only notices once it's on her wrist.
Yeah, like an echo? I like that. Patrick, read the rest.
Min hesitated only long enough for one anguished look at Egwene before leaving. Nothing Min could say or do would do anything except make matters worse. But Egwene could not help looking longingly at the door as it closed behind her friend. Rena took the chair, frowning at Egwene. I must punish you severely for this. We will both be called to the Court of the Nine Moons for what you can do. I, as your soldam and trainer, and I will not allow you to disgrace me in the eyes of the Empress. I will stop when you tell me how much you love being Damani, and how obedient you will be after this. And Tuli, make me believe every word.
Third mention of the Court of the Nine Moons, and it tells us that it's back in Shan-Chan because we know that's where Egwene is being sent.
Yeah.
So I cannot believe how many times I read through this series without realizing that we already know where the Daughter of the Nine Moons is from. Don't necessarily know who it's from, but we know she's Shan-Chan. Or we should.
That's possible in a different timeline that Egwene could have ended up serving Tuon.
And Tuli, make me believe every word.
Ugh.
And you know you can't fake it, so she actually has to believe. Has to believe in her soul.
That she loves being Damani.
Yeah. Will you read us into Chapter 43, Patrick?
Chapter 43, A Plan, and her symbol is the Adom. Outside in the low-ceilinged hallway, Min dug her nails into her palms at the first piercing cry from the room. She took a step toward the door before she could stop herself, and when she did stop, tears sprang up in her eyes. Light help me. All I can do is make it worse. Egwene, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Feeling worse than useless, she picked up her skirts and ran, and Egwene's screams pursued her. She could not make herself stay, and leaving made her feel a coward. Half blind with weeping, she found herself in the street before she knew it.
And we just left her being beaten for trying to channel while no Soldam was present.
Right.
And so Egwene is basically, at this moment, suffering.
Min got kicked out of the room, and that's where we left off. And Tuli, make me believe every word.
Tuli.
It is a nice name for a pet. Tuli, that's cute. In the context, that's a weird thing to say, but...
Honestly, I think I would name my cat Tuli if I had a cat.
Yeah, Tuli like tulip.
Or like Egwene, because she's badass and may occasionally bring out the claws.
It would be a great little Wheel of Time reference if you named your cat the same as the Soldam's cat that captured Egwene. Almost no one would get, except you guys. I always said if I ever get a cat, I have to name it General Meow or Chairman Meow.
I like it.
Because I think it's hilarious. So Min runs out into the street, and she doesn't know where she's going. She just doesn't want to go back to her rooms because she's so uncomfortable with what's happening. And she runs into Nynaeve and Elaine, hiding out in an alley.
The Discord channel is bringing up the last time I brought up my cat allergy.
Oh, I don't remember that. I'm not going to read that out loud.
It was on the podcast.
I think I do remember that now.
Yeah,
actually.
I was surprised you didn't remember that. I didn't want to say it out loud either, so I figured you can put it in the chat room. Oversharing. Yeah, so Min's running out into the street, and she is seen by Nynaeve and Elaine, who are there looking basically for Min or for Egwene.
Nynaeve kind of whisper shouts at her, and Min turns around and sees her. Nynaeve and Elaine there. Elaine notices that Min has been crying and asks if something happened to Egwene, but she doesn't explain. Not exactly.
No, because she doesn't want them running in there trying to stop the abuse that's going on right now, because they just don't have the ability to overcome what's going on.
Yeah, she has the
there.
thought that if she tells Nynaeve what's happening, she'll just go charging in.
And I don't think they would. I mean, this chapter is called A Plan, and I think they've realized the realities of the situation where, they're not going to go running in with guns blazing and pull them out. They need a plan.
Yeah. So Elaine asks about Egwene, and Min says she's as well as can be expected. And I'm skipping a bit, but I don't know how to get her out, though. I found a ship captain who I think will take us if we reach his ship with her. He won't help unless we make it that far, and I cannot say I blame him. But I have no idea how to do even that much. Nynaeve likes the idea.
And that do be Captain Bail Doman, who's trapped there because Turok wants to keep him there for his conversation and stories.
Also against his will.
Yeah. He wants to sail, but he's afraid that if he tries to make a run for it, they'll just
blow his ship apart.
Crush him.
Yeah.
I like the fact that the idea of breeches is spreading from Min. She's starting to become a fashion statement. Nynaeve's like, I've thought about wearing those since I've seen them on you. I imagine Min has very nice hips. They say that
as Robert Jordan might say.
I imagine just a girl in tight jeans.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she starts this fashion. And her heeled boots, she's wearing a very modern day dress. It would be what you would see like jeans and heels in any, city of wandering around.
And a button-up shirt, I imagine. I'm just going to Google that really quick because despite all the fantasy stuff I've read throughout my life, I'm not certain I know what breeches look like.
I thought it was just another word for pants, which is a British word for underwear.
Pants?
Yeah.
Did not know that. Short trousers fastened just below the knee, now chiefly worn for riding a horse or as part of a ceremonial dress.
Oh, so they're like waders.
Yes. I think they're the kind that strap under your foot so that you can put riding boots over them. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever had to wear like a uniform like that before?
Yeah.
Like a baseball pants? Those are breeches, basically.
Okay.
Well, when I was a kid anyway, they had like the strap that goes under your foot, and then you pull your shoe over it so that the pants stay tucked.
It's called a stirrup.
Doman is caught in the web, just like the girls.
This whole chapter is interesting because it's a big setup to escape with Bail Doman, and yet he never actually... No one boards his ship before he flees.
Doesn't he wait a bit, and then when nobody shows up, he just runs?
Yeah, basically the city
in the chaos.
And the girls don't even try and make it. They end up not going on the ship. Not trying to make it to the ship because... Well, basically, the Shan-Chan are driven away.
Right. Out into the sea.
Yeah. So they just end up staying.
But we left off at the part where Min explains that Egwene will be getting shipped out soon because of the ore sensing ability, her affinity for metals, or earth, I guess I should say. Which
we see come in handy with the Quendiar. She also tends to tear up the earth beneath people's feet. Like when they encounter the White Cloaks, she tears up the earth beneath their feet when they're coming back to the White Tower with Varen after Falme. So Egwene over and over again seems to be more talented with earth and fire than many of the other female channelers around her. That seems to really be her specialty.
Yeah.
Is essentially battle magic.
That's appropriate to have her as Amerlin for, a short period of time, but...
Yeah, she's definitely a green.
She would have been a green.
Yeah, she loves men. There's no doubt. But I think one of the points he likes to make with her is that she has the best attributes of all the various Ajahs. It's why she makes such a good Aes Sedai. She has incredible logic and actually comes up with good plans through her logic. She is good with battle magic, which makes her very green. She's a good negotiator, which we see... which makes her very gray. There's just a bunch of little things that we see her being, and she is what all Aes Sedai should be. She is the ideal Aes Sedai in all the Ajahs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
She is the Amerlin.
And Egwene's a badass. She's one of my favorite characters, although I say that about a lot of characters, I guess. Min says, I think I can get you guys inside. They don't really watch me because they regard me as a servant. She knows the way. Nynaeve says, take me to this man. I can't imagine he's any harder to handle than the village council.
So they're going to the ship first before they sneak in to get Egwene.
To secure a way out.
Yeah.
So that they can jump on this ship.
And then go.
While blowing Damani standing on ships out of the water. And that leads me to, for an instant, Min found herself reading the auras of the two other women. There was danger, but that was to be expected, and new things too. Among the images she had seen before, it was like that sometimes. A man's ring of heavy gold floated above Nynaeve's head, which is of course Lan's ring, her connection to Lan. And above Elaine's, a red-hot iron and an axe. They meant trouble, she was sure, but it seemed distant, somewhere in the future. We've talked about this viewing before.
Yeah.
The red-hot iron and axe, that nobody's really sure what it means.
And I've always come back to Rand losing his hand, is that we see it get burned off by Semirog.
Yeah.
And so I assume that it was going to be an axe to the hand, and a hot iron could also be the amputation of the hand. I've also seen the red hot iron be the staff that Ishmael puts in Rand's side.
Okay. But why would Min's viewing be about Rand above Elaine?
Because they love each other. Admittedly, I think Min's weakest viewing in the entire series.
Yeah. That's kind of why I wanted to bring it up, because we've talked about this before, but it's like...
I wanted to throw out all the excuses in there. But I do think this is one place where Robert Jordan let this viewing slip a little bit and never really fully resolved this one.
Yeah, people are suggesting stuff in the Discord channel. I've totally had these thoughts before, because an axe and a red hot iron could mean like anything.
It really could.
So we could make it work if we wanted to, but.
It could also be like her taking over Andor in terms of like the axe for the battles and the red hot iron of like her red hot will. It could be the red Terangrial. We don't know.
Yeah.
And since it's an axe, I always go back to Perrin with the axe and the hammer.
Yeah.
And then because Perrin cuts off the hand of the Aiel, but like why the heck is that over Elaine? Because it's in Andor, and maybe it has something to do with the fact that Andor is a kingdom that she's ruling, and there's this rebellion coming up, and the fact that she has to deal with two rivers, which is now rising up, and that has to do with Perrin. Like, everything's so connected that there's no way to really narrow this down, and there's nothing that's really obvious.
Yeah.
And so I can come up with about 1,000 different theories, but I don't have any way to say this one's better than that one.
And when Min doesn't explicitly state what the viewings mean, all we can really do is speculate, unless they're a lot of times they're super obvious, but other times they're vague.
And they can be very representational. Just because it's an axe doesn't mean that we see an axe, right? It could mean a severing hand. It could mean a battle. It could mean Perrin. It could, because it's a symbol of
Forge
something.
Of a new empire.
Because it's a symbol of something rather than like an actual physical representation. Yeah, we need the Shan-Chan Doomseer records to interpret all these different symbols.
They go off to go find Bail Daman and talk to him and arrange a deal.
They're kind of sharing their stories. They find out they've been in town for about the same amount of time.
And we just see a lot of the city and how overcrowded it is, full of refugees.
I noticed we end up this inn that used to be called the Watchers, or the Watcher.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. The inn had been hastily renamed the Three Plum Blossoms, but part of the word Watcher still showed through the slapdash paintwork on the sign.
I didn't even notice that.
Which we know is a reference to the Watcher over the Waves, which the Shan-Chan are punishing by hanging up over the sea until they die.
Yeah.
They're basically putting them in a cage and letting them rot away.
Yeah, that's a terrifying form of execution. Well, it's really similar to what the Shan-Chan do to execute nobles in...
They put them in the silk bag.
Shandar? Yeah, they put them in a silk bag and hang them off the side of a tower. That is way more terrifying than like beheading or something.
Although honestly, it's a pretty quick death because you're going to die from dehydration in a couple of days.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not
3-4 days is not really. I wouldn't call that a quick death.
No, but I mean. As opposed to like starvation. If you have like access to clean water, but not enough food, like you can last a month.
Yeah. And that's because the blood of the blood is not allowed to be spilled.
Which is the blood of Hawking.
Right. The man she was looking for was alone at a table in a corner. in his accustomed place, muttering into his wine. "Do you have time to talk, Captain Doman?" she said. He looked up, brushing a hand across his beard when he saw she was not alone. She still thought his bare upper lip looked odd with the beard.
So that's my plan for Jordan Con. I was going to shave the upper lip and
Captain Doman.
do a Leoner accent. I've definitely seen some people around with the shaved mustache. Although they tend
It's
to
a
be
thing.
larger.
Like all
folks.
Amish men.
Yeah. Fortune prick me, girl. He says that like twice in a row here.
Elaine jumped as he suddenly bellowed, "Innkeeper, mulled wine here." "It's all right," Min told her, taking a place on the end of one of the benches at the table. "He only looks and sounds like a bear."
Must be one hairy dude.
Probably. I also liked that Elaine is really thrown off by Doman's behavior. He's just a really rough guy. Oh my.
She still occasionally has that nobility sensibility.
That's who she is.
The next thing I have is Doman complaining that he thought he could just tell a few tales and be on his way, but this guy wants to keep him here time after time after time. And he's like, I'm not a gleeman. I can't keep him busy. You know, I'm running out of tales to tell. And
Yeah.
eventually, when he gets bored of me, I'm afraid he's cold-hearted and powerful enough that he's just going to have me killed.
Yeah. They ask him about his ship. If he's capable of outrunning the Shanshan, he says, yes, totally. I can outrun them, but they'll just blow me out of the water. He says, basically, if you could give me one of those Damani and put it on my ship, then we could totally get out of here.
And Nynaeve says, well, there are going to be 4 of us.
And I will expect you to be ready to sail as soon as we are aboard. Doman says,
It's not just about getting out of the harbor. I can do that, but I'm going to have these Domine coming after me. And Nynaeve sort of gambles a little bit, and...
What if I tell you you will sail as something better than Damani? Nynaeve said softly. Min's eyes widened as she realized what Nynaeve intended. What do you mean? He whispered. Nynaeve opened her coat to fumble at the back of her neck, finally pulling out a leather cord that had been tucked inside her dress. 2 gold rings hung on the cord. Min gasped when she saw one. It was the heavy man's ring she had seen when she read Nynaeve in the street, but she knew it was the other, slighter and made for a woman's slender finger that made Doman's eyes bulge, a serpent biting its own tail.
So that's about as quick as Min's viewing ever gets fulfilled.
Yeah.
Viewing, ring, like about 5 minutes later.
You know what this means, Nynaeve
Right.
said.
And there she's referring to the Aes Sedai ring, saying
Right.
she's a channeler.
Doman closed his hand over it. Put it away. His eyes darted uneasily. That ring do be dangerous.
No kidding. Okay, Nynaeve reckless much? Channeling on the street to try and open the collar, flashing her Aes Sedai ring. She's just like going for it.
Yeah, she's going for it, but she gets it, so it's hard to blame her, you know? And she's also bluffing. She's showing this ring, and most people think that, well, that means Nynaeve's Aes Sedai, but it doesn't. Not only is she not Aes Sedai, she's not even like a real accepted. She can't even channel at will.
And yet she's still super powerful.
Yes.
She packs a punch. I would sail with her on my ship, even knowing what I know. Well, unless Moghedien was coming after us.
She also hints that Elaine can channel. You might be surprised by what we can do even before we earn the right to a ring. When we sail, you will have 3 on your ship who can fight Damani if need be.
And she is being very careful to stick to the truth. She's telling Aes Sedai truths here.
Yeah.
Which is implying a lot that she is full Aes Sedai. But I don't think she's implying... I think she's being truthful that there are 3 girls who will fight and be able to...
Yeah, that's truthful.
Yeah. She just makes it sound like she is full Aes Sedai.
Right.
And Doman comes back saying, you may be Aes Sedai, but I've seen Aes Sedai get taken.
Listen to me and mark what I do say. He took another cautious look around and still lowered his voice and chose his words carefully. I did see a woman who wore a ring like that taken by the Shanshan. A pretty, slender little woman she was, with a big man.
Order.
Yeah. With her, who did look as if he knew how to use a sword. The big man put 6-7 soldiers on the ground before he did die himself. The woman, 6 Damani they did put around her, stepping out of the alleys of a sudden.
So she got shielded.
This is the capture of not Rima, because we know that this woman looked at one of the Damani and said, Rima, help me.
Shireen Kemenel. And I had talked about her in the last episode as one of the 2 Aes Sedai who never get rescued, who get fully converted.
Yeah. I'll remember it until I die.
She becomes Mylan, who is Tuon's favorite. So she's the one who is going to kill herself until Tuon steps in and like nurses her back to health.
Rima, help me. That is what she did scream. And one of the Damani did fall down crying. And they did put one of those collars around her neck of the woman. And I did run. So dark.
Really dark.
Do that be why you were here? Skipping a couple paragraphs. To free those two? You did say there would be 3 of you. You know what you need to know, Nynaeve told him briskly. You must be ready to sail on the instant any time in the next 2 or 3 days. Will you do it, or will you remain here to see if they cut off your head after all? Nice leverage, Nynaeve.
I would leave my aged grandmother standing on the deck to sail from here, but I did have to tell you. I enjoy the voice.
I like it. Do we think he sounds Scottish? Are we making that our collective headcanon?
Oh, do I sound Scottish when I'm doing the voice?
Or I guess it's kind of a piratey.
It's a piratey Scottish.
Scottish pirate.
Viking?
Sure.
Is that not I guess that's more of a Norwegian pirate.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm doing Michael Kramer's voice. I'm not imitating my Bail Domon. I'm imitating Michael Kramer's Bail Domon, but I do love it. Between him and Loyal, those are my 2 favorite voices that Michael Kramer does.
Yeah. I always imagine Ogier speak very slowly.
Well, I don't know. If you think I could get my books out and read them, I guess I could tell you a story about the Age of Legends. Where shall I start?
So, Domon agrees. Says he'll be ready.
With 3 who can channel, we may have a chance. I'll take that chance, basically.
Yeah.
And get out of here. And I think that's where the relief comes from there, is when she gets outside, she's like, oh, okay, I managed to convince him to help us without lying.
Yeah.
Basically.
She didn't know if she'd be able to do it. Although she also bluffs that she can get passage on another ship if Domon doesn't do it. That's not true.
1 or 2 small problems to work out. 1 or 2.
Although you are right in pointing out that she doesn't lie. She says, there are other ships, Captain, and I mean to have passage assured on one of them today. Not that she can and will, but that she means to, and she knows of other ships. That's all that she says. Nynaeve drew a long breath and stood up straight, tugging at her coat. With some people, she said, you have to be certain. If you show them one glimmer of doubt, they'll sweep you off in some direction you don't want to go. Light, but I was afraid he was going to say no. Come, we have plans to make. There are still 1 or 2 small problems to work out. I hope you don't mind fish, Min, Elaine said, which is a reference to their smelly apartment. 1 or 2 small problems, Min thought as she followed them. She hoped very much that Nynaeve was not just being certain again. I get messages like on Facebook and Instagram a lot, and people will, send a question or like ask, like someone today sent us a message just asking to like suggest other series that would be good. And people are often really surprised that I get back at all. I think they think that we're much bigger than we are.
I think a lot of people wouldn't bother to get back to them.
Probably.
I mean, anyone will tell you that engagement is important.
Yeah.
But it's not like we're engaging for the sake of engaging. We're engaging because, like, we enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
I guess I don't remind people that we're 2 nerds in a basement as much as I used to. I used to say that all the time. We're still 2 nerds in a basement.
With way too much free time, which is the only way that this thing works. We really should be more productive, but instead we make 3 podcasts a week. Going on 4.
Should be 4 soon.
And if I can eventually ramp up to 5, I'd like to, if we can just do like a week, one for every
5 days
day
a week.
of the week, 5 days a week.
It'll be like a real job. Are a good amount of you guys into the Mistborn series? Have any of you, I know that like some of you have read it, some of you haven't.
I know a lot of you are starting to read it because of this.
Awesome. That's great. It's so worth it. I just finished the first book today. It's really exciting. I tore through it. I had to borrow Seth's paperback to go walk around with it because I don't even have a copy of the second book. Well, a physical one.
I started reading it, and then I got into the audiobook and was listening to it while I was doing other things. So I got through most of the first one. We're going to finish up the trilogy, which should take us probably like another week or two.
Do you put your audiobooks, do you store them like in a cloud so you can access it from your phone?
I put them in iTunes on my computer and then sync them with my phone. So they're actually downloaded onto my phone.
Gotcha.
As MP3s. And then they're just in iBooks, and iBooks has an audiobook section. I can play them from there like a standard audiobook.
I always want to do more audiobooks, and I never actually end up doing it. But I spend so much time, like, I purposely walk to places that I could ride or use public transportation or something, just because I like having the time to listen to my podcasts and the excuse for exercise.
And then the other thing I've been doing is I do have a subscription to Audible. Then they're in the cloud, because then they're...
Julia uses Audible a lot. We have bought the Wheel of Time series between us probably 20 times.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just bought another Eye of the World last week.
I just buy the Eye of the World for people.
Yeah.
All the time. Just give
Constantly.
it away.
Yeah. And I honestly also believe that when you go and buy the paperback, they should include a link to download the file, the ebook.
Yeah. I'm almost surprised they don't. Can't you get a digital copy of the audiobook from the library now? Yes. One of my customers was telling me about this.
Oh, okay.
That there's some system with the local library where you can just, and they only allow you to have the file for like, however long, unless you renew.
That's fantastic. Yeah, libraries are great. They're really underappreciated and underutilized, especially in this country.
I used to love my local library. I don't really go at all, really. And these days, I should, though.
I was walking by the local one the other day. I almost went in, but I had Timber with me.
I probably spend like 8 hours a week sitting on my laptop in a coffee shop, or then I spend $15 because you feel like you have to, but also they've got great coffee. To save myself a couple of bucks a week if I hung out at a library instead. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize how awesome libraries are and how awesome librarians. People don't realize it's like a resource that you can tap for free.
Their job is essentially paid to be there to help you find information.
I had a lot of trouble. This was going back a long time ago, but I went through a phase where I was reading a lot of the really long classics, and I was reading War and Peace. And I came across a couple of like obscure references to words and then I tried to look them up in the dictionary, and they weren't there. So I like brought the book to the library and like highlighted these words and was like, hey, can you help me find what these words mean? Because they seem crucial. And they ended up being Russian surnames from the time. But I would never have figured that out without help of this librarian. Did research for me.
My memory of the library still goes back to the librarians helping me with the Dewey Decimal System and the card catalog. So that's really when how I learned to use the library. It was pre-computers.
I barely remember how to. I remember that though. The paper punch cards and.
I remember looking at microfiche.
Oh, yeah,
there was that
really
big machine and flipping through it. It's still some places the best way to get old newspaper is looking through microfiche. Although I guess most of it's been scanned, but
I would think. But I mean, that would have to take so much time and effort. Although then I suppose you only have to do it once because then you can just copy the file.
Yeah,
a million times.
But so much of that is just totally untouched for decades.
What microfiche? I don't think I've ever heard that word before. I always heard, is it the same as microfilm?
No.
Oh, interesting. Sort of.
Can anyone explain the difference?
How many librarians are part of our listeners? Wait, does that make 3 of you? Because there's only a couple people here right now, so that makes half of the people are librarians.
I mean, Aradia's tag is the evil librarian, so... But Christine, Aradia, and Mackenzie were all saying...
They work in libraries.
They work in libraries. And there's only 5 people in the chat room, so that's 3 out of 5. Folks, I think we have a trend here.
Nerds indeed.
Could it be that we all have some affinity for books in relation to this podcast? I'm humming. The humming is starting to become a habit.
It's definitely a thing. When we believe the answer is obvious, we pretend not to know for some reason. Oh. Thank you, Christine. Apparently microfilm is on a reel and microfiche is on a sheet.
Sheet, man. I did not know that.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?